The day you stop texting her could be the day she starts thinking about you the most. Most men never realize this until it's too late, and that's exactly why they keep making the same mistake. When a woman begins pulling away, the natural reaction for most men is to move closer. They text more, they call more, they try harder. They think that if they can just explain themselves one more time, show a little more effort, or prove how much they care, they'll somehow bring her back. But attraction doesn't work the way most people think it does. In fact, the more pressure you apply, the more likely she is to feel the need for distance. That's why no contact can become so powerful. When you stop reaching out completely, something important happens. You remove the emotional noise, the constant messages, the checking in, the attempts to get a response, all of it disappears. For the first time, she gets space. And while most men fear that space, it's often the very thing that creates the opportunity for attraction to rebuild. Think about it. If someone is feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, or emotionally conflicted, chasing them doesn't make them feel better. It makes them feel more pressure. Every text becomes another reminder that they need to respond, explain themselves, or deal with emotions they're trying to sort out. Instead of missing you, they're focused on escaping the pressure. But when you finally stop, that pressure vanishes. Now she's free to experience life without your constant presence. And ironically, that's when she can begin to remember you differently. Instead of associating you with stress, pursuit, or emotional intensity, she starts remembering the good moments, the laughter, the connection, the things she appreciated but may have overlooked when you were always there. It's like this doesn't happen overnight. That's where most men fail. They stay silent for a few days and expect miracles. Then anxiety takes over and they break no contact. They reach out because they're uncomfortable with uncertainty. But the power of no contact isn't in a few days of silence. The power comes from genuinely letting go of the need to control the outcome. When you stop trying to force something to happen, you create the conditions for something natural to happen. And during that time, something else changes too. Because no contact isn't supposed to be about sitting around waiting. It's about redirecting your energy. Instead of obsessing over what she's doing, you start focusing on your own life, your goals, your health, your confidence, your future. And the more you invest in yourself, the less desperate you become for a specific result. That's when your mindset begins to shift. You're no longer acting from fear of loss, you're acting from self respect. Ironically, that's the version of you that is most attractive because when a woman senses that you're no longer trying to convince her, pressure her, or chase her, the entire dynamic changes. The emotional weight disappears, the tension fades, and space finally has a chance to do what constant pursuit never could. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't reaching out one more time, it's having the discipline not to. The moment you disappear from her life, something strange begins to happen. Not immediately, not the next day, but gradually, almost without her realizing it, the things she once saw every day suddenly aren't there anymore. And that's when your absence starts doing something your presence never could. It becomes impossible to ignore. Most men think attraction comes from being constantly available. They believe that if they're always texting, always checking in, always trying to maintain connection, they'll stay important in her life. But human nature doesn't work that way. People often don't fully appreciate something while they have unlimited access to it. Think about anything valuable in life. The more available it is, the more ordinary it feels. But the moment it's gone, its value becomes clear. The same thing happens with relationships. When you are always there, sending good morning texts, asking about her day, making her laugh, supporting her through problems, those things became part of her normal routine. She didn't have to think about them because they were expected. Your attention was always available, your presence was guaranteed. Then one day, it isn't. Suddenly, the phone doesn't light up with your name. There's no message waiting, no check in, no emotional support arriving on demand. And at first, she may enjoy the space. She may feel relieved. She may even think she doesn't miss anything at all. But that's usually because she's still adjusting to the silence. As days pass, something begins to change. Life continues moving forward, but certain moments start feeling different. Something funny happens, and there's no one to share it with the way she used to share it with you. She has a rough day and realizes you're no longer there to listen. A memory appears unexpectedly. A song, a place, a conversation, something small reminds her of what used to exist. And that's when absence starts becoming real. because absence creates contrast. When you're constantly present, there's nothing to compare your presence against. But when you're gone, every day becomes a comparison between life with you and life without you. This is why no contact can be so powerful. It allows someone to experience the full reality of your absence, not the threat of your absence, not the idea of it, the reality. And here's what most men never understand: you don't need to remind someone of your value if they genuinely experienced it. Time does that for you. The problem is that many men become impatient. They fear being forgotten. They think if they don't reach out, she'll move on completely. So they send a message, they check her social media, they try to stay visible. But every time they do that, they interrupt the process. They give her another small dose of attention before she has the chance to truly feel what life is like without it. The strongest position isn't constantly reminding someone you exist. The strongest position is allowing your absence to reveal the impact your presence once had. Because when someone finally feels the void you left behind, they often begin to understand your value in a way they never could when you were always there. And that's when missing you becomes impossible to avoid. One of the biggest mistakes men make after a breakup is assuming that silence means nothing is happening. They think that because she isn't calling, texting, or reaching out, she's completely forgotten about them. But what they fail to understand is that silence often creates something far more powerful than communication ever could. It creates curiosity, and curiosity is dangerous in the best possible way. Think about it. When people know exactly what's happening, they stop wondering. When they have unlimited access to information, their imagination has nothing to do. Everything is predictable, everything is clear. But the moment information disappears, the mind starts filling in the blank. That's exactly what happens when you commit to no contact. Most women expect a certain reaction after a breakup. They expect the emotional text, the late night message, the attempt to reconnect. Even if they don't want it, they often anticipate it because that's what most people do. That's the pattern they've seen before. But when that reaction never comes, something changes. At first, she may not think much about it. She may assume you'll eventually reach out. She may believe you're just taking a few days to cool off. But as those days turn into weeks, a question begins to form in the back of her mind. Why hasn't he contacted me? And that single question can become incredibly powerful because now, instead of you thinking about her all day, she's starting to think about you. What is he doing? Is he okay? Did he move on? Is he dating someone else? Does he even care anymore? The human mind hates unanswered questions. It naturally seeks closure. It wants certainty. That's why people constantly check messages, social media notifications. They want information, but no contact removes that information. Suddenly, you're no longer predictable. She can't monitor your emotional state. She can't assume she knows exactly where she stands with you. And the less she knows, the more space curiosity has to grow. What's interesting is that curiosity often creates more emotional engagement than direct communication. When you're constantly texting, there's very little mystery. She knows you're there. She knows you're thinking about her. She knows exactly how you feel. But when you're silent, she doesn't know. And uncertainty causes people to pay attention. This is why trying to convince someone to miss you rarely works. Attraction can't be negotiated, curiosity can't be forced. The moment you start explaining your value, you reduce it. The moment you start chasing answers, you remove the mystery that naturally creates interest. The strongest position is often the one where you don't need to explain anything. Because while you're focused on improving yourself, building your life, and moving forward, her mind is left with unanswered questions. And unanswered questions have a way of lingering much longer than answers. That's why no contact isn't just about creating distance, it's about creating space for curiosity to develop naturally. And once curiosity begins, it often opens a door that constant pursuit could never unlock. Because sometimes the reason she starts thinking about you again is simple: you're no longer giving her all the answers. One of the hardest things to accept after a breakup is the possibility that she'll meet someone new. For many men, that's the fear that keeps them awake at night. They imagine her moving on, finding someone else, and never thinking about them again. But what most people don't realize is that new experiences are often judged against old ones, whether consciously or unconsciously. At the beginning, anything new feels exciting. That's just human nature. A new person comes with mystery, fresh conversations, and possibilities that haven't been tested by reality yet. There are no old arguments, no disappointments, no emotional baggage attached to the connection. Everything feels easy because everything is still being discovered. This is why so many people confuse novelty with compatibility. Just because something feels exciting doesn't mean it's better. It simply means it's new. And when someone leaves a relationship, they often focus on what was missing rather than what was valuable. They remember frustrations more clearly than strengths. They pay attention to problems instead of appreciating what worked. This creates the illusion that happiness is waiting somewhere else. For a while, that illusion can feel very convincing, but eventually, reality arrives. The new person starts becoming familiar. The mystery begins to fade. Habits become visible. Personality traits that once seemed charming become ordinary. Differences that were easy to ignore in the beginning become harder to overlook. The relationship enters the stage where excitement alone is no longer enough. And that's when comparison naturally begins, not because she wants to compare, not because she's actively thinking about the past every day, but because the human mind automatically evaluates experiences against previous experiences. Maybe the new person isn't as emotionally grounded as you were. Maybe he doesn't make her laugh the same way. Maybe he doesn't understand her on a deeper level. Maybe he lacks qualities she never appreciated while she had them. Whatever the reason, comparison starts revealing things that excitement originally hid. This is where many men make a critical mistake. Instead of allowing time to work, they spend months trying to prove their value. They send messages, post things for attention, try to make her jealous, or constantly remind her of what she's missing. But value doesn't need constant advertising. In fact, when you try too hard to prove your worth, you often weaken it. The man who keeps chasing communicates that he doesn't fully believe in his own value. The man who walks away communicates the opposite. He trusts that what he brought to the relationship will eventually speak for itself. And that's why handling a breakup with dignity matters so much. Because when comparison eventually happens, she's not only comparing relationships, she's comparing how each person handled difficult situations. Did you become bitter? Did you become desperate? Did you lose control? Or did you remain calm, focused, and self respecting? Those things matter more than most men realize. The way you carry yourself after the breakup becomes part of the memory she compares against future experiences. And if you handled yourself with strength while others rely on attention and validation, that difference becomes increasingly visible over time because eventually excitement fades and reality takes its place. And reality has a way of revealing what truly mattered all along. The biggest misconception about no contact is that it's a strategy to get her back. That's how most men begin it. They see no contact as a countdown timer. They stop texting, stop calling, and then spend every day wondering if it's working. They check their phone constantly. They analyze every social media update. They wait for a message that may or may not come. But that's not where the real power of no contact comes from. The real power begins when your focus stops being her and starts being you. At first, that's difficult. Your mind naturally wants answers, it wants certainty. It wants to know what she's thinking, what she's doing, and whether she'll ever come back. But over time, if you commit to the process, something starts changing. The emotional energy you were investing in her suddenly has nowhere to go. And that's a gift because now you have a choice. You can continue obsessing over what you can't control, or you can start investing that energy into the one thing you do control, yourself. This is where transformation begins. Maybe you start taking your health seriously again. You get back into the gym, you begin sleeping better, eating better, and carrying yourself with more confidence. Maybe you start pursuing goals that you've neglected. You focus on your career, your business, your education, or your purpose. Maybe you reconnect with friends, develop new skills, travel, or challenge yourself in ways you haven't in years. Whatever form it takes, the result is the same. You start growing. And growth changes everything because confidence isn't built from hearing someone tell you you're valuable. Confidence is built from proving it to yourself. Every goal you accomplish, every challenge you overcome, every promise you keep to yourself strengthens your sense of identity. Slowly, you stop seeing yourself as the man who got left behind. You start seeing yourself as the man who's moving forward. That's a completely different mindset. And here's what's interesting: people can feel that change. Confidence affects The way you speak, the way you walk, the way you make decisions, and the way you handle uncertainty, you become less needy because your happiness is no longer dependent on one person's approval. Most men think attraction comes from trying harder. In reality, attraction often comes from becoming better. Not better to impress her, better because you genuinely improved your life. That's why some women return after a long period of no contact and are surprised by what they find. They expect to see the same man they left, the same insecurities, the same emotional dependence, the same need for validation. Instead, they encounter someone different, someone stronger, someone calmer, someone more focused, someone who no longer centers his entire world around one relationship. And whether she comes back or not, that transformation becomes the greatest reward of all. Because even if she never reaches out again, you've still won. You've built a version of yourself that is more confident, more capable, and more emotionally resilient than before. And ironically, that's often the version of you that becomes far more attractive than the one she originally walked away from. Because no contact works best when it stops being about getting her back and starts being about becoming someone better than you were yesterday. The final reason women often return after no contact has nothing to do with tricks, tactics, or psychological games. In fact, it's the one reason most men completely overlook because they're too focused on getting a specific outcome. They want a text, a phone call, a second chance. But the deeper truth is that people are naturally drawn to those who respect themselves. And self respect is impossible to fake. You can pretend to be confident, you can act detached, you can follow every dating strategy you've ever heard. But eventually, your actions reveal what you truly believe about yourself. That's why the way you handle no contact matters so much. When someone leaves your life, you have two choices. You can spend your energy trying to convince them to stay, or you can accept their decision and continue moving forward. Most people choose the first option because it feels safer emotionally. They think that if they just say the right thing, explain themselves better, or prove their worth one more time, they'll change the outcome. But what they're really doing is communicating something they don't realize. They're saying, my happiness depends on you choosing me. And that's a dangerous position to be in. Because the moment your self worth becomes dependent on another person's decision, you hand over your power. You begin negotiating for something that should never require negotiation in the first place, your value. People who truly value themselves don't need constant validation. They don't need to force connections. They don't need to chase someone who has already decided to walk away. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care about themselves enough not to abandon their own standards. This is where self respect becomes incredibly attractive. When you accept reality instead of fighting it, you demonstrate emotional strength. When you refuse to beg for attention, you demonstrate confidence. When you continue building your life regardless of what someone else chooses, you demonstrate independence. And those qualities are rare. Most people operate from fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of losing someone, fear of not being enough. But self respect operates differently. It says, I would love for you to be part of my life, but I don't need you to be. That's a completely different energy. And people feel that difference. Over time, as she reflects on the relationship, something becomes increasingly clear. She remembers not only the connection you shared, but also the way you handled the ending. She remembers that you didn't create drama. You didn't chase endlessly. You didn't try to force your way back into her life. You accepted the situation with dignity. That leaves an impression because strength stands out in a world where most people react emotionally. And here's the irony: the moment you genuinely stop needing her to come back is often the moment you become most attractive again. Not because you're trying to create attraction, but because you've returned to yourself. You've reclaimed your focus, your confidence, and your identity. At that point, whether she returns or not almost stops mattering because you've already achieved something more important than getting someone back. You've become someone who never has to beg to be chosen. And that's the kind of self respect people never forget.